The feds have our phones anyway, so if something breaks, like, you will get an alert on your phone. Hi YouTube, it's Jessica, and we have a lot of time on our hands with being in quarantine, and we should be in quarantine. Like, you should be inside, you should not be partying. You know, we're still in a pandemic, people. Anyway, because of all the time that we have on our hands, I was already one of those like podcast people prior to the Rona. So I've just been subscribing to a lot more. So here are 4 podcasts that I'm going to share with you that hopefully you can start adding into your day. So the first podcast suggestion I have is Up First by NPR. So Up First is a nice radio program that they have. It's roughly 10 to 12 minutes, and it's truly the headlines of the day, everything that you need to know. And it airs from Mondays to Saturdays, and it's in the morning. So once you can find it online, you can find it in the podcast store, wherever else you listen to podcasts. Something that I like about it, you can probably get 5 to 6 of the major stories from the night before, things that like broke overnight. And it's a really nice way, and it's very fast paced. They speak with reporters not only from NPR, but other outlets as well, who are really, at the front lines of particular issues. I like it. In comparison to a lot of other news, like sometimes it can feel overwhelming, especially in a pandemic, where it's like, wow, the world is burning. But being able to like start my day and at least have everything that I need to know, I don't necessarily need to like sit and watch local news for 14 hours a day or any sort of like news outlet for that amount of time, because the feds have our phones anyway. So if something breaks, like, you will get an alert on your phone. So I think that that's the right amount of news for me to consume, especially in this pandemic. So my second podcast suggestion for you is Rom-Com Pod. Mert is behind the camera right now, so props to her. I was kind of like complaining like, I don't really want to listen to anything, but it's a very cute story. It's in multiple parts. It's about a young woman named Claire. She's in her late 20s. She's engaged to her college sweetheart, and I'm not, spoiling anything, but like obviously their relationship ends because you're not the same person that you were when we were younger. She can't get her refund for her honeymoon back, so she ends up going to Italy, having like a really nice adventure. It's very sweet, very straightforward. Anytime we're like driving, going to like the grocery store with our masks, or we're going to Maika's house with our masks, or anywhere else with our masks in the middle of the pandemic, we'll like listen to it. I think it's about 5 or 6 parts, and the last episode they fast forward into the future, so you see what ends up happening with Claire. It's super cute. It's everything that you anticipate like a Hallmark or a Lifetime movie being, except it's in podcast form, and I would say it's more Hallmark because Lifetime is a bit more bug because they have like murder. Number 3. LeVar Burton reads. So in Reading Rainbow, LeVar Burton would read picture books to us, and we'd be like, oh my God, I love it so much. His voice is so beautiful. And his voice is still beautiful now, except it's in podcast form. And in LeVar Burton reads, he reads his favorite short fictional stories. And the only thing that they have in common is that he loves them. He says that in the podcast. It's very sweet. The difference is, even with it being like fictional short stories, they aren't necessarily like Madeline or things like that. Some of them are short stories and they're fictional, but like they're horror. Some of them, they have like not trigger warnings per se, but they say like, hey, if you've got kids around you, even though it's like fiction, like cover their little ears sort of thing. It's really nice. My favorite part of each episode is like right in the beginning before he begins. He's like, and everyone take a deep breath. Like, he hold it, and he's like, and here, he pretty much says like, here we go, and he like exhales. It's very nice. I will put it there so that it's less weird. And my last podcast suggestion is Nice White Parents. The New York Times has done like a series of really interesting podcasts in my opinion. So they had the whole 1619 Project, Still Processing, and the New York Times also has The Daily. So with Nice White Parents, it's a new podcast where they're talking about the history of like public school education and who the strongest force in terms of education being shaped the way that it is today. It's white parents. They talk a lot about class, they talk about race, and as you can tell, based on the first video that my sisters and I did, I am most likely to call something racist. Yeah. So it's very interesting, and as a child of like the public school system, hearing how certain parents and what their desires were for who their children's classmates would or wouldn't be has ultimately changed the lives of like thousands, if not millions of kids all across the country. It's really good. It's very informative. It's not necessarily tied to the news cycle, but as we, you know, are entering like this fall term, it kind of can bring you back into like school where you're like, oh wow, like I didn't know that, you know, a particular group of people could have had like this much swaying power, but they did. It's super informative, and each episode is roughly 50 minutes to an hour. So if you break it up, I think it's definitely worth a listen. So there you have it. Those are just 4 of my favorite podcasts that I'm listening to right now in quarantine. There's so much time on our hands, and I think that, you know, we might feel compelled to just, you know, like I'm going to try to do everything with every single moment of my day. Like I don't listen to these every day. I don't listen to them all the time. Maybe, you know, up first, just so that I can have something because I work in the news. But I think that it's really important for us to, you know, stay active, for us to figure out what we're going to do with our time, because, you know, it's still a really hard time right now. But the good thing about podcasts, it's like whether it's fiction, whether it's news, whether it's informational, whether it's, you know, comedy, there's so many ways where we can, you know, be entertained right now. And I hope that you are staying safe out there on these YouTube streets. If there are any sort of podcasts that you're listening to that you love, I would love for you to write them in the comments, and be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. Bye.